Hi there, welcome to my 15-minute presentation that aims to explore some of the prevalent social issues occurring in Australia education today. My name is Kayla, and with a strong desire to promote social equality, I plan to discuss the typical stereotypes that exist and how important it is in today's society to challenge those typical stereotypes and break those typical social stigmas. In that case, this presentation will plan to explore social class and inequality, taking it from a personal perspective from myself and how I actually aim to break those barriers. Secondly, cultural difference and identity will also be explored as this places a significant impact on social class. Thirdly, I will explore the gender inequalities that also exist, as I had noticed very large gender disparities between men and women at the last placement I worked at, which was an all-female, single-gendered school. So first of all, let's talk about social class and inequality in education. As the saying goes, the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. There's a continuous cycle of poverty. In many cases, this may be true. A lack of education, a lack of parental support, and a lack of income will generally lead to a vicious cycle of someone following the same path. Meanwhile, those people who have money, a supportive family, wealthy parents, and access to a good education are set up for success. How is this fair? This is the typical stereotype, and as Weber and Marx categorize our social class, we are programmed to believe that the social class we are categorized under is determined, and that is the path we're going to lead. However, just because you come from a disadvantaged area doesn't necessarily mean you are set up for failure or are going to continue living that same cycle of poverty. In my own personal experience, I consider myself someone who grew up in a lower socioeconomic area. I lived in the western suburbs of Melton, which was the western suburbs of Melbourne, and I attended a government school. This was a very low socioeconomic school, which had a very poor reputation. My parents were not poor, but they were not wealthy either. In recognition of Karl Marx, my family was considered working class, and to Weber, middle class. I had friends who attended independent schools as well, and even though they were given everything that they wanted, I soon realised that even though they were considered a superior means in the sense of their social standing, it did not matter what school I went to because it definitely did not determine my future pathway. What I mean by that is myself, my two other girlfriends both went to university. We both completed a university degree. One became an osteo, one became a paramedic, and I became a teacher, and I'm still pursuing that by finishing my master's degree. The friends that we had who were private school students did not end up, well, the ones that we were friends with anyway, didn't end up going to university. If they did drop out. They ended up becoming hairdressers, beauticians, and filling in administration roles. Not to say that that's a bad career choice or a poor career choice, but it definitely shows that the education or the school that you go to does not necessarily determine the career that you are going to do. It also goes to show that there are so many other factors that play a role in determining your career path. For instance, when I did go to university, I have developed a really good relationship, or friendship, I should say, with another girl who has, I guess, is perceived as a completely different social class to me. She went to a private all-girls secondary school in Essendon, which was the inner suburbs of Melbourne. Her parents were quite wealthy. She lived in a richer area, especially compared to me. One parent was a doctor, the other parent owned a business, and they spent a lot of money on her education. What I'm getting at here is we both ended up in the same position today, and we have both ended up becoming PE teachers. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that self-drive, passion, determination, commitment, and support from those around you is what ultimately will guide you in the right direction to success. And I guess the overall message is that your social class will not necessarily determine the person you are or the journey that you plan to take. The last point that I want to talk about here is culture, and how culture can place a significant impact on your social standing as well. So if we have a look here at cultural difference and identity and take it back a step to when we considered to the point when we considered white people to be a much higher superior means as opposed to black people. Although Although these times have changed and there is nowhere near as obvious, and this is nowhere near as obvious in today's society, there are still definitely inequalities that exist between different cultures of today. Now, we all know that Australia has always been a significantly diverse nation. There's no surprise there. All of us at some point have migrated over here, and whether that be for a better life, a home of freedom or wealth, or for other reasons. What I'm getting at here is, why are immigrants and Muslims so degraded to having a much lower social standing? And ultimately, the reason for this, if we have a look towards a political stance or the political context here, the media portrays these women, these cultures as people who, for instance, refugees are bad and that all Muslims are terrorists. This is portrayed quite largely in the media, and this makes us become prejudiced towards these people as we are conditioned to believe what the media says. In reality, we know that not all Muslims are terrorists. However, we still have these views at the back of our minds. We know the saying that goes, not every bad person, there's not bad in every person. So as the saying goes, there's good in every culture. One bad person does not mean every person in that culture is bad. With that said, not all Australians are perfect either. And with that said, I want to lead into the cultural identity of the educational context here and link that back to social class and identity, cultural identity specifically. What I've noticed from my teaching rounds is that the Catholic sector and the independent sector and the public sector are quite different in relation to their cultural diversity. From my experience, I noticed that the Sunshine College, a public school, was much more culturally diverse as opposed to the Catholic school that I worked at, which was a single-gendered female school. For instance, if we take a look back to Sunshine College and my experience there, a lot of the students were EAL or refugee immigrants, so they just recently migrated over to Australia. This school was also quite socioeconomically disadvantaged, and it was considered to be a school where a lot of refugees went. So there were a lot of language barriers at this school. There was also a lot of Torres Strait Islanders and African ethnic groups. On top of that, there was also a very large portion of deaf students. In saying that, there was a substantial amount of support for these students. There was a Sunlit program that supported students with EAL needs, so it was very assisting with their reading, writing and speech. Although, with saying that, this poses another social issue that supporting students to learn English can also be quite difficult, and it can make it harder for them to assimilate. What I'm getting at here is the social issue around ELL programs is that some argue against monolingualism, which suggests that English is the most preferred language. And this also leads into a further debate of pressuring students to assimilate to Australian culture. Personally, I think the programs are absolutely relevant, and it's absolutely necessary for students to learn English in order to engage well with the community. And it also suggests, my argument here is that just because they learn English doesn't mean they need to stop speaking their preferred language at home, which also allows them to speak both quite bilaterally. More so on assimilation though, adjusting to Australian culture can be quite difficult for a lot of refugee students, especially when they are exposed to discrimination, racism and bullying. But what the education system is trying to achieve here is the promotion of multicultural education and respecting and embracing cultural diversity. So this has become a very large push in education systems today, and this is supported by the need to integrate and implement anti-discrimination policies, anti-bullying, no tolerance for bullying policies, and these all lay in accordance with the Safe Schools initiatives. So what I guess the multiculturalism is a massive thing, especially for the government schools, as there is a much greater cultural diversity. However, the school that I worked at in Braybrook, Caroline Catholic Chisholm, it was an all-girls school, single-gendered, but majority of the students were Vietnamese, Chinese, Filipino, or Anglo-Saxon. So there was much less cultural diversity at this school. and therefore the ethnic demographic was much more marginalised. However, with that said, there was a large social issue observed around subject selection. So a lot of these students actually struggled because their families pressured them into choosing subjects that were associated with maths, chemistry, physics, and advanced sciences, just because they were very eager for their students to perform well so that they could have a great career. In saying that, music and drama were often perceived as subjects that were a lower socioeconomic status, and basically, students were urged to select maths, chemistry, and physics due to the perceived social stigma that these subjects carried a higher social standing. In some cases, this often led students to neglect and give up the subjects that they really enjoyed because they wanted to satisfy and prove to their parents that they were very highly academic. As teachers, it's crucial for us to remain culturally sensitive and respectful to the diversity of students in our classrooms. All students have a past, and the past is indicative of their learning and behaviour. And what we need to achieve is to remain culturally sensitive to all individuals in our learning environments. The last social issue that I want to address before finishing off for today is gender inequality. The reason that I want to address gender inequality and the reason that I wanted to discuss it in a lot of detail is simply because I noticed a very large disparity between men and women at the school I worked at in Caroline Chisholm. Basically, the significance of these issues was noticed from the divide between the female campus and the male campus. So basically, the female campus had a lot less facilities. The males had a lot more sporting facilities. They had greater access to the library, greater access to the facilities. If we go back here, there was a great example of how this varied. So the female campus was often neglected and the male campus was given a lot more opportunities. Also, a big thing on that was the typical cooking subjects, textile subjects, drama, music, dance were all taken at the female campus, while the woodwork subjects, the metal subjects, and all those technical tradie subjects were all undertaken at the male campus, which shows the typical gender roles that exist in the typical gender roles and gender stereotypes that exist, and how that is quite it needs to change. Okay, so another thing that I want to point out is moving on to other gender roles and other gender inequalities in teachers is that there are still more male principals undertaking leadership roles. And this goes on to say that males still earn more than females, okay, and that's simply because they have a leadership position and they're more likely to get paid more. If we take a look down to the gender inequalities for students, subject selection, differences in uniform, school performance, and career choices, all of these have a large impact on gender inequalities that exist. So, for instance, if we have a look at uniforms here, why is there a distinct uniform between males and females? Females are wanting to wear females are made to wear skirts and dresses, boys are allowed to wear shorts and pants. What happens if a male wanted to wear a dress, or what happens if a female wanted to wear the pants or the shorts instead of the skirt? Why is it so different? And that is something that's coming into play with the whole gender disparity thing. If we take a look at career choices, it's much harder for females to drop out of school, and that's just because it's harder for them to attain a job when they are going into girls don't really want to go into trades, and beautician jobs, hairdressing jobs are much more, you don't get paid as well in jobs like that. If we go back to the school performance, the typical idea of males performing better in maths and English while females taking English and reading, they're being more competent in those areas. Subject selection, girls wanting to choose PE might be considered not okay or not normal, and all of these gender inequalities are becoming much more, I guess, relatable to education today, and it is time to break those typical social stigmas. Thank you for watching, and that is all.